Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I've got another Master Duel video for you all. So, I was very surprised this morning when I checked some of my notifications on like Discord and some of the other just kind of social media apps I'm on, and on a couple of them I was seeing Master Duel Forbidden Limited List update, and I was like, whoa. Actually, not too surprising, because even though it feels like we just had one, it's been about a month. These usually come monthly towards the end of any given season. We usually have a Forbidden Limited List update because Konami does tend to do them a bit more frequently for Master Duel than they do for the OCG and TCG. Some of our lists do end up having some more minor hits, and this is kind of one of those lists. This list, all in all, is a little bit odd, even though, again, a lot of the hits are going to be more minor. Some of them I think are actually kind of smart, and others I don't know if I quite see it. But let's go ahead and just dive straight into it. So I'm going to go up here to notifications. We'll check out the differences here. So as always, cards that are getting reduced in number of copies are going to be in blue. Cards which are getting unlimited are going to be in white. As you can see, we only have one. The Metaverse here is the only unlimited card. We have some cards going to 1 and going to 2. Nothing getting banned this time around. I'm going to start with the cards to be limited. Fluanderies and M-Pen. That's certainly something. That's certainly something I did not expect to be on the limited list, that's for sure. Fluanderies and M-Pen is obviously going to be Fluanderies' main boss monster, right? Of course, we all know what M-Pen is, right? This card going to 1 is very shocking. It's shocking for a multitude of reasons, actually. First and foremost being, like, I just feel like with Fluanderies, it's like that Simpsons meme here. It's like stop, he's already dead. Like, Flo was already like pretty much a tier 3 deck by the time this newest selection pack has come out and shifted the meta, Bystials and whatnot. Flo, definitely still a good deck, but definitely was already starting to see a decline in popularity. But moreover, like far beyond that, it's like Fluanderies has already taken so many hits and is like, it's been a fine deck for pretty much most of the hits it's taken. Getting the barrier statue banned was absolutely a hit that was needed, and nobody's complaining about that. Prosperity going to 1, yeah, not just for Flo's sake, but in general, Prosperity is a card that should probably just be at 1. A lot of the other hits, though, definitely feel excessive. Map to 1, I guess, is another hit that I will say I'm, like, pretty much in agreement with, but I think that's the only. I think Map to 1, Prosperity 1, and Barrier Statue Banned are about all Fluanderies. Those are all hits they needed in order to stay, like, you know, strong, but still in check. They've also, however, lost a copy of Duality. They've lost their Terraforming. They have now also lost 2 of their Fluanderies and M-Pen as well. Just seems like Konami really has it out for this deck. I actually was seeing some people on, I believe it was Reddit, were saying that this is kind of something that happened in Duel Links too, where if a deck was very competitively viable and also very cheap to build, Konami would often go out of their way to target it, and it didn't really feel like that too much, but like this hit to M-Pen, it definitely feels like Konami is going out of their way to target Fluanderies. And if we look at Flo, the only in-archetype Ultra they have is their Advent of Adventure, and that's it. The extra deck, you don't even particularly need like any particular cards because you don't go into your extra deck anyway. Ideally, you do have a good amount of like Link 1s and Rank 1s that the deck can actually make, but for the most part, Fluanderies is a deck where you just crafted a few staples, Advent of Adventures, and you were good to go. It does not seem like Konami is a very big fan of that, as again, M-Pen going to 1 here. Yeah, even though they might not be the most popular deck a lot of the time, I still think this is definitely excessive. Fluanderies definitely did not deserve this hit. Eradicator Epidemic Virus, another very interesting limit. This is going to be a pre-hit. Might seem like a bit of an odd one, but we have new Labyrinth support that has been leaked to be dropping relatively soon. And Eradicator Epidemic Virus is one of the cards they would often make very strong use of, not only having the relevant bodies of both Lovely Lady and Lovely Labyrinth to sack off for the Epidemic Virus, but also the ability to search it particularly well, especially with the new support that's going to come out here shortly. So, makes sense why this card is going to 1. Also, like, it's just not a fun card to play against. Like, I don't think really any virus card, like, anybody's excited to have one resolved against them. I mean, to be fair, you're not excited to have most disruption resolved against you, but the virus cards in particular are extra groan-inducing. It's actually really funny because the weekend before this change is happening, or is announced, I guess, we just had... What was it? There was a TCG tournament, I think it was a German one, where, like, Labyrinth did exceptionally well, and a lot of people are calling for Lovely Lady to get banned, I think, instead of Eradicator Epidemic, which is a little weird. I thought that was a little odd that the Twitter thread was focusing on how I think, anyway, I could be totally mistaken, but from what I remember, the Twitter thread was saying, ban Lovely Lady, because it searches out all these broken trap cards. And it's like, well, we could just ban stuff like Eradicator if we're going to go that route. But I don't know if it's actually because, like, in response to that huge outcry, maybe, maybe not. I'm inclined to think not. Usually changes like this, I would like to think anyway, are planned out much further in advance. But the Eradicator Epidemic virus going to 1 is definitely an interesting hit. I think it's a good hit for best of 1, honestly. Tier limits Solic. So tier limits are taking another hit on this ban list, but not with any of the fusers, which is what I think a lot of us were expecting, or I think most people, myself included, were really expecting Kit Close to go to 0 on this ban list, and instead Solic is going to 1. Now, I have seen a lot of people on social media really complaining about this. I've seen people saying tier limit is still too strong, it's still the most dominant deck by far, the deck needs Kit Close to go to 0 and the fusers to go to 1, this hit to Solic won't do anything. And I actually disagree with all of those points. To start off, tier limits are, you know, very likely still just the best deck right now. You can even take the very likely out of it. They are still just the best deck by now, but it's not by as nearly significant of a margin as we saw before. We are decidedly and definitely not in tier 0 anymore. Honestly, that was pretty much apparent as soon as the new selection pack came out. Honestly, just after a couple of days in playing, it's like, oh yeah, you know, tier limit's still good, but you definitely can feel it. You definitely feel, you don't feel quite as much of a dominance there. Kit Close not going to 0, I actually don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Same with the fusers not going to 1. It seems like Konami is really willing to experiment with tier limits here in Master Duel, and rather than just apply the same blanket approach they did in the TCG or OCG, it seems like they're a little more interested in seeing, like, okay, what is the power level that tier limit can be at? Like, how many tools can this deck have before it's really a problem? And I think there's merit to that. I honestly think there's merit to, like, because here's the thing, and I've said this a lot when talking about Banless changes in particular, and I see it in my comments too. I see it literally everywhere Yu-Gi-Oh! Is discussed. A lot of people have this idea that a deck getting hit on the Forbidden Limited list should just be completely nuked, gutted, be unplayable afterward. That is, I completely disagree with that. I think that's a horrible idea to intentionally make it so you cannot play an archetype through banless changes. A deck should ideally still be playable as a, you know, as its identity, as its archetype, but just be more toned in what it's doing. And I don't think that, you know, and I know people are going to say, like, oh, well, you can ban Kit and put all the fusers to 1, the deck is still playable. And yes, it completely is. However, I do like this approach of seeing what is the least we can hit, because that makes the deck generally more accessible. Master Duel also does seem to like its consistency hits, and Solic to 1 is actually a huge consistency hit to tier limits. It might not seem like it on the surface. Like, this might seem like one of those hits where it's like, what is the point of this? But the ability to not only mill a copy of Solic to get a search, but then also still be able to search a Solic later or sooner, just depending on the mills, but the ability to not only utilize the graveyard effect, but then also still set another Solic on the same turn is frankly ridiculous. This definitely limits not only the consistency, but also the disruption power that tier limits have. Like, now they really have to make a decision, right? For example, if you open with, like, Foolish Burial Goods, do you send the Solic? Because that's going to be a search for sure, but then you're going to miss out on a often very key piece of disruption for your strategy there. Another thing to think about too was like Heartbeat. Heartbeat, which actually had been seeing an increase in play since the new selection pack in the Forbidden Limited list dropped earlier this month. That card is now probably not nearly as good because Soleil is at 1. You just have so many fewer targets for it that it's like, is it even worth it? It just feels super situational at that point to actually try to make use of the effect of when it goes to the graveyard there. So Soliac on the surface, Soliac going to 1 rather, on the surface that hit might seem irrelevant. It might seem like the wrong hit, but I think it's an interesting hit. I will say that in terms of power, I think the fusers still probably need to go to 1. If the fusers are at 1, we might be able to get away with still keeping Kit close. Like, I think that's probably still fine, especially if Tier Limit Soliac is also going to be at 1. So, all in all, not the hit that people were expecting to tier limits, including myself, but I'm personally not dissatisfied with it. I think this will have a noticeable impact in how tier limit plays, and if you're observant enough, how often it, or how much more it'll brick, / how much less consistent it will be when you're playing against it. Now, of course, due to just cognitive bias, a lot of people are still just going to remember all the games that get wrecked by tier elements and say this hit does nothing, while ignoring all the games that the deck bricks. They steamroll it, they don't even know what they're playing against, so they don't even bother to check that it's tier elements. So I think this will have a bigger impact than a lot of people think it does. That's just my 2 cents on the hit there. So the limits, yeah, these are definitely not any of the limits I was expecting at all for a Banless update. But I think they're, for the most part, interesting. The impin hit, again, I just don't agree with at all. It was it's so unwarranted, so unnecessary. But we also definitely need to talk about the cards that are getting semi-limited, because holy cow, this is also going to have a pretty major impact on the consistency of a lot of the top meta decks right now, including Branded Fusion going to 2 right after they get their next wave of support. That's honestly pretty rough. To be fair, it seems like they were waiting for this wave of support to come out before semi-limiting the Branded Fusion. That way the deck has access to more tools that will help it maintain some of its power and overall consistency. But like, how bad does it feel, especially if you just got into the Branded deck because of this new support? How bad does it feel to have all these new toys to play with, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, your best card's going to 2? I think it's fine, ultimately. I think the timing could have been a little bit better. Like, I like this hit, I just think it probably should have been on, like, the next Banless update and not this one. It just seems a bit odd to me, again, to be semi-limiting Branded Fusion right when Branded just got, like, a huge new breath of fresh life, but at the same time, that also does kind of make sense at the same time. I understand the reasoning, and I actually agree with the hit. I just don't agree with the timing of it when it comes to Branded Fusion at 2. But I think overall, this definitely doesn't kill Branded as a deck by any means. It just makes it, like, you just open with the Branded Fusion a little bit less often. That's all. Sprite Jet going to 2. Now, in addition to Sprite Blue, this is another hit where I don't disagree with, like, the concept. I just don't like the card that was actually hit. I just think that Sprite Jet should have gone to 1, and then that could have been it. Like, I think Blue at 3, Jet at 1 is the way to go. That's the way the OCG did it. Oh, and then also Elf getting banned, but I'll actually talk about that more here in a moment. But Jet to 2 and Blue to 2 is just kind of weird. Here's the thing, right? A lot of TCG players, because the TCG ban lists don't do this nearly as often as OCG, and definitely not as often as Master Duel, a lot of TCG players really don't like semi-limits. I actually don't mind them as a concept. Like, I think semi-limiting a card for consistency isn't the worst idea in the world, but when you do it to, like, multiple cards within an archetype, I guess that is actually a point against the Branded Fusion semi-limit too, when you think about it that way, because, you know, we already have Aliber and Branded opening at 2. Like, I feel like one of those cards should just be at 1, and the other should be at 3. And I think that is also, again, the case in the OCG, isn't it? I think Branded Fusion is at 1, but Aliber and Opening are at 3 in the OCG. I think that just makes more sense. And I guess same here with Sprites. Like, why are Blue and Jet both at 2? And Starter, actually, for that matter. Why are all 3 of those cards at 2? Why can't just Jet be at 1, or just Starter be at 1? I think having all the cards at 2 is just kind of like awkward. And again, I don't mind consistency semi-limits as a concept. I just think they need to be used a little bit more sparingly. And I think that is especially true when we look at this next hit. Swap Frog at 2 is so confusing. I don't understand that at all. I just think Ronotone should probably just be banned, honestly. I think that's the case in the TCG, but not the OCG. But, like, has Ronotone historically ever really done anything fair? Well, actually, in Edison, it's used to tribute summon from Monarchs, which I think is actually pretty fair. But, okay, as except for that, since the advent of Link monsters, has Ronotone been used for anything fair? It's very rare. Swap Frog to 2 is just, again, it's weird. It's a weird idea to have so many cards semi-limited for one deck. I'm not a huge fan of it. Again, I think you could... I don't even think Ronotone needs to be banned, actually. I more or less just said that as, like, I would prefer Ronotone at 0 and Swap Frog at 3 to what we have here. Because now it's, like... Now you just have to, like, plug the holes that you know... you're missing here with, like, other cards that, like, weren't your first choice, but are still fine. And it's weird. I don't know. Not a fan. I feel like I've said that 3 times now. Let's talk about Sprite Elf for a second. That's another card that should be hit, and definitely could have been hit to take care of swipes, other than 2 more semi-limits. Sprite Elf is a card that is not only very good in sprites, but also outside of sprites. In fact, when Sprite Elf gets played, and you have the, like, feature up that'll show you statistics, you'll see that it's got a 50% use rate. I think 50.3 if I recall correctly. And then you look at Gigantic Sprite, which is like the only other real Sprite card we actually get usage statistics for, and it's at 19%. So that'll show you just how much Sprite Elf is played outside of sprites. In fact, going by those numbers, you can very easily deduce that more decks are playing Sprite Elf than Sprite decks, or more non-Sprite decks, I should say, are playing Sprite Elf than Sprite decks, which is definitely an indication that the card is probably just too strong in general, not even just for the archetype. Plus, the TCG has also proven that sprites definitely play fine without Elf, with only Sprint. I think Sprint plus Elf, I mean, a lot of people were saying it, that it's ridiculous to have both those cards legal at the same time. It makes the deck very, very strong. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I also don't think that semi-limiting Sprite Jet and Swap Frog are like the answers that anybody wanted or are really ultimately going to be helpful in that regard. It's like, at this point, we all pretty much know that Elf is going to get banned at some point. It's like, let's just let it happen already. I don't know. It's just, plus, I mean, you know me, I really like sprites, especially sprites as an engine, so seeing Jet go to 2 is also just annoying when Blue and Start are already at 2, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Yeah, and then Metaverse. We don't have Mystic Mind. Is this card actually doing anything? Like, yeah, you can activate something cute like Necro Valley, or the field spell that says you can't summon anymore. Oh, Summon Breaker, that's what it's called. Like, yeah, you can activate one of those cards with it, but, I mean, it's fine. Like, this card is totally fine. This card could have been at 3 the whole time, honestly. It's just, again, without Mystic Mind, it's not doing anything obscenely unfair, so I think it's fine. So, yeah, all in all, a very odd list. There are quite a few things here that kind of make you go, like, what were they thinking, you know? But there are still some hits here that I think are overall good and fine. Namely, the Tier Limit Soliac to 1. Excuse me. While I do think the Fusers still need to go to 1 at some point, I think that Soliac going to 1 will make more of an impact on the deck than I think most people are assuming. And the Eradicator Epidemic Virus to 1 I think is also not a bad idea either. As just a pre-hit to make sure that Best of 1 isn't kind of ravaged by it once the new Labyrinth support hits. But honestly, the rest of this is just... The semi-limits all just feel bad, I think, for whoever's playing these particular decks. Like, again, I'm in the department where I'm like... And as somebody who plays both Branded and Sprites, definitely Sprites, I'm in the department of, like, just put Jet to 1 and leave everything at 3. Just put Brain Diffusion to 1 and leave everything else at 3. Like... Stop having 4 to 5 cards per deck be at 2. It's again, I don't mind the idea of consistency semi-limits when they are used more sparingly. When it's this many, then I think it gets weird. And the Flandries and Empen, again, I think that's terrible. I honestly just completely disagree with that. And this is someone who's not even a fan of Flandries. I think the deck is super annoying, but at the same time, it's like... it's gotten to the point where this deck I generally don't like, I just feel really bad for, because I feel like Konami just hates him worse, and it's like, just leave him alone. Just leave the birds alone, but... we'll see. I think Flandries is probably still fine as a deck. It just gets, like, obviously less consistent, and yeah, feels bad. It definitely feels worse to play, but in any case, that's going to about do it for this coverage of the Forbidden Limited List update. Not that you don't already, but definitely you all let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm definitely eager to hear what you all think of this update. But yeah, without further ado, let's just move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is XLex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.